I work the late night shift at a retail giant. I double as a cashier and a self-scan attendant. The city I live in has never really been a great place to live in, as it's pretty much a boring go-nowhere ghetto on its last dying breath. It's also never really had a big crime or drug problem either. Lately, I've been noticing that a lot more tweakers have been filtering through the doors. I assume it's meth because they're always jittery and have bad teeth. Anyway, it's got me on my guard all the time because these fuckers like to either steal or cause trouble, and I'm usually having to deal with it. There's this one guy who comes in every single day without fail, and every day he tries to steal from the self-scan. As I'm not security, I'm not allowed to accuse or apprehend, so I've just got to play this bullshit game where I act like he must have forgotten to scan a bunch of items he was intentionally trying to hide. He usually goes off on an animated tirade about how the government made these machines to replace workers. I never engage or make eye contact because that's just like an invitation for him to go on and on. The guy ends up getting banned for shoplifting when security finally does something about him. Anyway, a couple of nights back I was working until midnight. It's slow at night, so the shift was pretty easy, no trouble at all. When the shift is over, I call for an Uber and everything goes as usual. Uber dude is friendly but brings up how he doesn't like my city. He grew up there and is appalled by the rise in random bums and junkies wandering the streets. I don't get out much, and I haven't seen everything he's going on about, so I assume he's being dramatic, or he must have had a pampered upbringing or something. The car stops at my house and I get out, say goodnight to the driver. Now, I live on a dead-end street with a wooded area right past the house. The porch light is off tonight because, unbeknownst to me, my girlfriend had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for me to get home and forgot to turn it on. It's a quiet street off a main road, but at this time of night you could hear a pin drop. I climb the porch, get my keys out, but before I can open the door, I hear this squeaking sound. At first, I don't know what the hell it is, but it makes me jump out of my skin. As it gets louder, I assume it's a neighbor's rusty gate or something, and I naturally start looking for the source of the sound. Then I hear it. That sound bicycle tires make when they break on sand. There is an orange streetlight in front of my house, and who do I see right beneath it? That tweaked out customer sitting on this old school Pee Wee Herman looking bike. I think it was one of those 50s style Schwinn bikes, but I thought of Paul Rubens when I saw it. I'm in the darkness on my porch, so while I can see him, he has no idea I'm there. He starts looking like he's scoping out my house, and generally looking around in all directions. Maybe he's lost, maybe he's checking to see if someone's watching. In either case, I step into the light where he can see me, so he knows he's being watched. I plan on asking him what he's doing, but he speaks first.
Got the day off?
He asks casually like it's not midnight down some back alley road he has no business being on. I don't know what to say, as I'm generally creeped out and thinking about what gardening tools my girlfriend may have left on the porch earlier, just in case this turns south. I do nothing but nod, and he returns it with a nod before pedaling back off into the night. I have no idea what you were doing, but Pee Wee Herman bicycle tweaker, let's not meet again. This happened in the summertime when I was 12. My dad used to take me and my young brother to St. Augustine in Florida every summer to go see the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum and Castillo de San Marcos. I honestly thought it was lame after the first 2 years. What preteen wants to go in the blazing hot sun and watch men in old-time war uniforms play flute or talk about cannons? But I knew my dad loved it, and I got to spend time with him since I lived with my mum for most of the year. This particular year it was excruciatingly hot, and after we walked around, my dad decided to take us into town to walk along and look at the shops. It wasn't uncommon for homeless people to hang around where we were in town. We found an ice cream parlor, and my brother and I practically begged to go. My dad obliged, and I, stupidly, got a double cone of triple chocolate ice cream. I mean, seriously? It's so hot people's flip-flops could melt to the ground, and you think a double cone is going to last out there? There was no room to eat, so we left with the ice cream and continued to walk down the street. It didn't even take 5 minutes for my hands to be covered in melted, sticky chocolate. It got everywhere, and when I say that, I mean my hands, my shoes, my legs, my hair. A complete disaster. To this day, my dad and brother make fun of me because of it. After laughing at me for ruining all my clothes, he told me to walk back to the ice cream parlor and get some napkins to clean up with. And he told me to do this by myself while he waited a couple of minutes away. I had to walk down a crowded street full of people and shops and who knows what. But he also took me and my brother to the movie theater and would leave us alone when we were 6 and 4, so I can't really rely on his judgment. As I was walking back to the ice cream parlor, I couldn't help but be overly aware of my surroundings and the men looming above me. I was maybe 5'2", had braces, and wearing a Minecraft shirt and jean shorts that went down to my knees for God's sake. I looked my age, and being that young and alone makes you vulnerable. I passed 2 homeless men, one of which I recognized from walking past the first time. I guess he recognized me too, and noticed my dad and brother weren't with me anymore. When he peeked off from his friend and started walking after me, I tried to ignore it, thinking it was purely a coincidence. But then he was right behind me, and I could practically hear him breathing, even though it was so crowded and children were shrieking and music was playing. Then he reached out and grabbed my arm and said something along the lines of,
"You need help with that, sweetie?"
His eyes darted to the still melting ice cream cone in my hand, and then up to my face. I was paralyzed with fear, but my brain was giving off the "this isn't okay" message. I managed to yank my arm away and run the rest of the way to get the napkins. After that, I was too scared to go past him again, and after 15 minutes my dad and brother came back into the parlor and asked me why I didn't come back, and what was taking so long. I told him about the homeless man, but he just shook it off and told me I was overreacting. So yeah, homeless man and St. Augustine, let's not meet. For some background, I'm a young female. Short blonde hair, 5'6", petite but still some curves. It's normal for me to get attention while I'm out, since I do dress quite out there. I'm really into fashion and colours, so it's hard to miss me. I was on medication at the time that makes me very, very spaced out. So this starts off when I had just gotten off the train to go to my bank branch. I had misplaced my credit card and needed to pick one up. I was wearing these bright green thigh-high heels and a red dress. I was unfamiliar with the area and didn't know where the bank branch was in the shopping centre, so I called up my friend to see if they were 100% sure they had a bank here. That's when I noticed him. He was a bald guy wearing casual clothes and was on the phone staring at me. I thought nothing of it initially, and I eventually found the bank. I went inside and got what I needed. Naturally, I tested my new card with the ATMs outside, and that's when I saw the same guy waiting outside the bank looking at me again. This wasn't strange to me, I didn't think anything of it. I walked to the other end of the shopping centre so that I could catch the bus to get home. I didn't know the bus timetable, and I couldn't look it up as I have a shitty phone and the battery is complete garbage. I didn't notice the guy with the blue shirt was following me until he'd sat down right next to me at the bus stop. He was weirdly close. He wasn't talking on the phone anymore, and he started a conversation with me. I never assume the worst, so I thought he was just gonna ask me a question about the bus timetable or directions or something. He introduced himself. Very quickly, he switched and asked me very oddly specific questions, such as,
"How old are you? Do you have a boyfriend? How much do you weigh? How tall are you? How many friends do you have? What is your family life like? Are you healthy? Where do you hang out with friends? Where are you headed?"
I told him where I was heading. I know it was really stupid, but he told me he was heading in the opposite direction. Complete opposite. Between the questions that I answered truthfully because I couldn't really avoid the questions, he would make comments about my appearance.
"I've never seen a prettier girl than you. You don't find too many people who dress so uniquely."
I was literally messaging my boyfriend telling him what was going down, until, of course, my phone ran out of battery. Eventually the man continues conversation with more questions. He said nothing about himself, despite me asking the same questions with him just to try and ignore them and avoid answering. My bus finally rolls up. I stand up and say thanks and goodbye, something like that. He stands up as well and follows me onto the bus, going in the complete opposite direction to where he said he was heading. I sat down, silently panicking, but nothing too bad, because the medication that I was on at the time made me silently tired and chill, so I didn't have a panic attack. He sat down in the seat behind me, not talking to me anymore. Eventually, about 5 minutes pass and it's my stop now. It's a popular stop due to the cluster of apartments, but I kept seated till the very last second because something was off. I got off and he wasn't able to follow. I looked at the bus as it drove past me, and he had this unfriendly look on his face, looking directly at me through the window. I believe that I was being interviewed for sex trafficking. I really do believe something was insanely off. He wasn't asking normal questions, and he followed me onto my bus despite saying he was heading in a different direction. If he was into me, you'd think he'd ask for my number or something. To the creepy guy who loves to quiz random girls about their whole life, let's not meet ever again. Ever since I was 14 years old, I've been scared of lightning. It started when I was out on a soccer field during a thunderstorm and lightning struck the fence just over 100 feet away from me. The sound was deafening, and I can still remember the awful sensation of the sound vibrating through my whole body. But this wouldn't be my only incident involving a lightning strike that I came too close to. The next time, it wouldn't only terrify me, but it would also be my salvation. I appreciate living in a small town. It is because of how incredibly safe I feel here. In the city, you can barely be outside alone as a woman after 10 PM without feeling such discomfort that you feel compelled to check behind you once or twice every minute. All of that discomfort, however, doesn't only happen after said time or during the darkest hours of the day. It can happen at any time, but that is something you learn. Something I had to learn. I was 17 and it was the summer holidays. I was spending most of it at my then boyfriend's house, and he lived with his family about 20 minutes outside of the city. I lived with my parents at the time in the city centre, just along the green subway line. So if I wanted to get home, I had to take the commuter train to the central station, walk across it and switch to the green subway line and ride a few minutes on there to get to my station. I was then in one of my rebellious periods and had a month before bleached my hair. I loved it at first, but after a while my roots started to show and I realized my mistake. My angel of a mother had tired of my fuss over it and booked me at a hairdresser so that I could go back to my natural deep brown hair colour. The day for my appointment at the hairdresser came, and I was as usual at my boyfriend's. I needed something from my parents' apartment first, so I put on my headphones and jumped on the commuter train. I switched as usual to the green line, and I sat near one of the doors that I knew would line up perfectly to where I would get off. I like to crowd watch when I travel. Not to stare people out or anything like that, but just to look at people and think about where they are going, what they do for work, or maybe make up a story about them. It is a kind of game that I often find myself playing on the subway or commuter train. I played that game that day. I looked around at people, and when there was one station left until my stop, my eyes stuck to a man who was sitting a few feet in front of me. He was tall, maybe in his mid-30s. His hair was dark and scruffy. He was wearing dark clothes and big boots. He sat with his elbows leaning against his knees, crouching slightly down towards the subway floor. Today I don't remember what my analysis or fictional story was of him, but I know I saw him. The woman in the speakers shouted out my destination, and I stood up and went to the doors and stepped off. When I got out of the doors of the station, I saw that it had started to rain, so I pulled my big hood over the headphones and started to quickly walk up to the apartment, which was only a few hundred feet from the station. The apartment is an old building with a large wooden door facing the street. The door has a glass pane that runs along the entire door, and when you enter, the staircase is entirely in marble with an old wooden elevator and an iron lattice door that you have to close manually. When I got to the door, I put in the entry code and pushed up the door. When the door was swung aside, something was reflected in the glass. I turned around and saw the man from the subway standing behind me. At first, I was shocked that he was so close to me, but I assumed he was one of my neighbors or a neighbor's friend. I had assumed that he stood so close to me because it rained and he didn't want to get wet, so I said hello and pressed up the door an extra time with my hip while I took off my headphones. He did not answer. I went to the lift and pushed the button, but I heard that it did not start, so I assumed that the neighbors had opened the lattice door to park the elevator at their floor while they locked their door. I turned around and saw the man standing behind me, shaking. It was not a typical type of shaking that's common if you have a fever or a cold, but more like a spastic twitching. He stood there jerking, with his head and his back as curved as he had been on the subway, but this time his eyes were not on the floor, they were on me. He opened his mouth to talk, but only incoherent sounds came out, while the shaking and jerking became more frantic.
"What's your name?"
He said at last. I remembered my parents' words of wisdom to never tell your name to a stranger, especially one whom one feels threatened by. I wanted to tell him to go out, but I felt like I was frozen and provoking him might make the situation worse. I replied with a false name. He then asked,
"Do you live here?"
I lied and answered that I don't, I'm just here to see a friend. I remember thinking I was smart. Now he didn't know my name or where I lived, I thought, but it was now he started moving closer to me. I started backing. He must have seen the fear in my eyes, but he continued, scuffing towards me. I heard the elevator engine start ticking and that it was on its way down. He told me he has been following me on the train, that he saw me there and that he just had to follow me. It was now that he lifted his head from his previous position, showing me how tall he really was, and the shaking stopped. He spoke again.
"You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen."
If I thought I was frozen before, that was an understatement. I was now pressed against the elevator door, and he was so close that I could smell him. Some may think that these words still have to be somewhat flattering, but the way he said it, it sounded like a death sentence, like something terrible. It was about when I heard the elevator stop on the first floor and someone walked down the stairs to the courtyard door. That door is located on a small platform between the ground floor and the first floor stairs. You also know how you can recognize and distinguish your parents' steps from others? I did with these steps that came down the stairs, and I heard they were my father's. I quickly thought that I would scream for him, but then I realized that the man would know that I first lied, and that he might get angry and do something to my old father. That was when my father opened the door to the courtyard and the lightning struck the yard. The sound waves of the cracking lightning pressed itself through the open door and made the whole marble stairwell scream. I screamed. The man screamed. I went to my usual position regarding thunder and lightning, fetal position on the floor. He, on the other hand, jumped backwards and started running outside, while he shouted that we will be seeing each other again soon. I barely realized what had happened. I went crying up in the elevator and into the apartment where I told everything to my mum and also my dad when he came up from the courtyard. We reported the incident to the police and I went and dyed my hair, which made me feel a little safer as my appearance changed quite drastically. I was still a little scared after the incident, but also confused. I just kept thinking about what he was saying when he ran out.
"We will be seeing each other again soon."
I knew at least that I absolutely did not want to see him again. However, I didn't get what I wanted. About a month had passed. I was on my way to the central station to meet up with my boyfriend who was on the commuter train on his way to me. I stood and waited for him in the hallway between the commuter trains and the subway. In that particular hallway, a lot of people are walking, either to the trains or from the trains. Very few people are standing still in it. As I said, I stood there, looked down the hallway from time to time to try and see if my boyfriend had come yet, when I saw someone else standing still. There was someone standing on the other side of the crowd, and although everyone goes in different directions and creates a kind of blurred effect on him, I see who it is. I freeze just like before. He stares at me, not like our first meeting, but as if he is trying to figure out if I am who he thinks I am behind the dark hair. Then my boyfriend comes from the crowd and hugs me, and I have to look away from the man a few seconds to hug him back. I lean my head against his shoulder and look over it to see if the man was still there. He was gone. I have never seen him since. Has he seen me? At the time of this story, I was 18 and I had recently moved to a new city for university. I got a job quite quickly, so all was going well. I'm a woman, by the way. I was only into my third shift of this job when it happened. Basically, this job was at the north side of the city and I was living on the west side. There was only one bus that went directly from my house to the job. It wasn't a very popular bus, and when I finished work it would only come once an hour. So when I finished my shift at 10:30 PM one night, I was just sitting on the pavement of the bus stop. I had to wait half an hour for the next bus. Anyway, this guy walks past me. He was probably only about 50, but he looked a lot older, very skinny, sort of junky looking type. He asked me what I was doing on the pavement and if I was okay. Fair question. I was just slouched alone on the ground in the middle of the street, but I wasn't standing half an hour for a bus when I was just running around throughout an 8-hour shift. I just explained I had finished work and was waiting on the bus to go home. He kept asking questions which were innocent enough, like random shit about the weather, and then he asked me where I lived. I said I lived on the west side, and he asked whereabouts. I didn't want to tell him the exact area, obviously, so I lied and said a random street which was about 10 minutes further on the bus. He said he was going there tonight, and I was like, oh great, you'll be on the same bus as me then. Finally the bus comes, and this guy decides bothering me on the pavement wasn't enough, and he sat next to me on the bus, which was literally empty except for the two of us. I was tired, it was late, and I was still trying to get used to the new job, plus I was up for uni at 7 AM, so I kinda just nodded along to his questions. He hadn't asked anything weird yet anyway. Then he started asking if I had a boyfriend. I said I didn't have one, but come on, this guy was like 50 and I was 18. Surely he knew he didn't have a shot. Then he kept asking about my ex, like his name, why we broke up, how long ago, very specific questions. When I told him my ex was 22 because he asked me, he was like,
Oh, so you like older men?
Anyway, after the long 30-minute bus journey, my stop was coming up, so I rang the bell to get off as last minute as I could, since I told this guy I lived further away. I got off the bus and decided to go to McDonald's because I hadn't eaten all day, and to be honest, I didn't want the guy to watch me walk away towards my house from the bus. I ordered my stuff from McDonald's and kind of forgot about the guy because I was that exhausted and I just wanted to get home. I finally got my order and thought I would eat it in the restaurant. I literally jumped out of my seat when I felt a hand grab my shoulder. I turned around and it was that creep from the bus. He looked like he was enraged, and he said,
I thought you lived on the other street.
This dude literally got off at the next stop and walked here to confront me about this. I asked him to go away, but he just sat across from me and watched me with pure rage. My mind was whirling with what I could do. I thought, if I go home he's obviously going to follow me. I was thinking of going to the bathroom in McDonald's, but he might follow me there as well, and the place was empty. There were barely any staff because it was closing soon. I thought my best option would be to go pretend I was ordering something and tell an employee to call the police, but then I thought I was just being paranoid. I decided in the end just to get up and go home. I mean, I'm a 5'3" girl and I was tired, but I've been in dodgier places alone at 3 AM, so stupid me thought if this guy tries anything, I could totally kick his ass. Yeah, right. Shockingly, he follows me out of McDonald's and my flat is literally a minute walk away. He was screaming after me, why did I lie to him? And then he runs about and tries to link arms with me and starts being nice again? What the fuck? So I'm pulling myself away and starting to speed walk when he grabs me and tries to kiss me. I lose it at this point and decide, yeah, this guy is a fucking creep and I'm not being paranoid, so I push him as hard as I can. I scream at him to fuck off and other things. He starts running away from me in the other direction, so I run back to my flat looking behind me to make sure he isn't watching me. I don't even know where this guy is from, and I don't really know where to avoid. A few months later, I was getting off the bus about 3 PM in that same spot when someone taps my shoulder, and guess who it was? As if he was one of my friends I hadn't seen in ages, and not some creep who followed me on a bus and tried to sexually assault me. I yelled really loudly for him to fuck off, and a lot of people started to look over, so he walked away. Please, let that be our last meeting.